Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we got an article, once again, from Voices of Wrestling, that WWE's Women's Revolution is dead. It was written July the 10th, 2024. Now, some people ask me why I keep picking on Voices of Wrestling. It's like, you can't pay for this kind of smugness. You got to just experience it for yourself. This is one of the few times I read an article. I skimmed through it because I always skim through these things. But I actually wrote down some of my responses. So we're going to go through this. It was written by Roma Faliani of Voices of Wrestling. So, as usual, this was a very poorly written article. But at least it had some ideas. As usual, of course. There are nuggets in here that I actually like. We'll see how those are when we get there. But it was mostly garbage. Let's get into this. The opening paragraph says, quote, "It's hard to express the feelings I'm trying to evoke while writing this. It's not anger by any means." See, look, nobody cares about this. All right? Nobody cares about your feelings. This is an essay. State what you believe, and then go through why you believe it. State your central point, and then state your factual information, okay? So the opening part is about this person and what they believe and all this kind of crap. Then we get to the women's revolution is dead. It says, quote, "Something changed in the way women's wrestling was perceived in the United States. And that's thanks to many factors. The main one being how WWE has not used its platform to say that women's wrestling should be important for the wrestling part and not for whoever becomes viral." Let's pause right here because I wrote down that it's basically trying to be a viral versus wrestling comment. But wrestling is entertainment, and fan interest is key in people enjoying wrestling. So saying that you shouldn't feed into what's viral, or later in the article he talked about WWE falling into social and political trends, which to I agree to some degree. But if, let's say, Jada Parker is viral online, or Nikita Lyons, well, this is people telling you, that they want to see more of her. Therefore, you should put her on the screen more. It's pretty common sense to me. I don't understand why you would do the opposite. What would be the benefit of doing the opposite? I don't know. But let's cut through this. He says, "To be honest, even the mere idea of a women's revolution was just a vague trademark from a company that never admitted their mistakes and never was accountable for them. But in this day and age, where women's wrestling is having some of the best to ever do it weekly in the ring, it's really unfair that WWE does not care enough about giving them the flowers they deserve." Let's pause right here too. Because he says the women's revolution was just a trademark. It's like, yes, it was marketing, and everybody with a functioning brain knew that. But despite the fact that it was a marketing gimmick, it was also legitimate. They changed the words from divas to women's. And twice women main event at WrestleMania. They created women's tag team championships. They actually changed how they started recruiting women. Well, pretty much everything changed. Women's storylines changed. The way women's characters evolved changed. There was a lot of things that changed with that women's revolution. It wasn't just merely a marketing gimmick. They just used the marketing gimmick to get people to realize that they're changing their perception of women's wrestling. Now, the later comment, which he said that they never admitted to their mistakes. Well, there's plenty of documentaries and programs or whatever where various people have said, "Oh, we shouldn't have done that," or "It wasn't in the best of taste," or whatever the case may be, in some of the presentations of women. It's always been never enough with certain fan bases that you can pretty much grovel And they'll always say it's never enough. You didn't do enough. You could go 180 and women are main eventing pay-per-views and main eventing WrestleMania, and they'll still turn around and say it's not enough. This is the situation that we're in right now where, perfect is the enemy of good. And it's never going to be perfect. Because even when you have women's only promotions, they complain about objectification, which is one of the things we're going to get into in a minute. Because there's, some models in there, or some women like to do bikini photo shoots or whatever the case may be. So there is no such thing as a perfect wrestling promotion or a perfect way to advance women's storylines, but they have done drastically different over the course of the last almost 10 years now. So he gets to the meat of the article finally by saying the point of this article will be to analyze 3 items that will help us understand why I'm saying that the women's revolution is dead. These are focused on, I'm just going to shorten it, the booking of the division, perception of women's wrestling and female wrestlers, and wrestling culture. That's pretty much what he's going to argue. Now, he's going to go into the booking first. And this is where I probably agree with him most. That the booking of the women's divisions is pretty bad, especially on SmackDown. He says, quote, "It's no surprise, really, considering the state of the women's division in WWE and how most important storyline today is that of Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio, making Morgan this kind of character that just exists to be a part of a narrative, rather than being the protagonist of said narrative, as the women's world champion. This is not new by any means, because this is the exact thing was done with Rhea Ripley back when she was champion. The difference being how Ripley presented herself and how she practically stole Judgment Day from whoever was the leader at the time and became the protagonist of a division like it's meant to be." Now, let's pause it right here, because this person doesn't know anything about writing. And I don't mean by, writing essays. I mean writing fiction. Liv Morgan is what's called an antagonist. And her very gimmick is all about antagonizing Rhea Ripley. It's not really a Liv Morgan, Dominic Mysterio story. Dominic Mysterio is just a pawn in this situation. No different than the title itself. Liv Morgan is using Dominic to grind the gears of Rhea Ripley. That was her sole reason for even being involved with Dominic. If you follow the story, Liv Morgan said she wants to take everything away from Rhea Ripley. One of those things was the championship. She didn't beat Rhea for the title, but now she has the title. And the other is Dominic Mysterio. And of course, later it's going to be Judgment Day. So, as you can tell, if you follow the story, Dominic has been completely taken off guard by how aggressive Liv Morgan has been pursuing him and how she's been trying to seduce him. And the whole thing has been about Liv grinding Rhea Ripley's gears. That's it. Dominic is just the thing that she's using to bother Rhea Ripley. And this is all because she's still mad that Rhea Ripley injured her months ago. So Rhea Ripley is still the protagonist of this story, which is why she's the babyface of the story, because protagonist means babyface. Antagonist means heel. Liv Morgan is the heel of the story. So if you follow the story and you are as invested or paying close attention, then you would understand what's going on here. Later, I keep saying he, but it's just as likely for it to be a woman. Then discusses why the storyline is focused on a man, when I just answered that question. The man is just a pawn, because Dominic Mysterio is Rhea Ripley's kayfabe boyfriend, so it was all about, I stole your championship, I stole your man, I want to steal your group because you stole months from my career. And it all, of course, goes back to them being tag team partners and everything. So he goes into his second part. He says, if I had to sit here and talk about, let's cut through this. He says, I'll focus on his treatment, him being Triple H, of the women's division, and specifically how female wrestlers just don't feel important on the shows as wrestlers. The main complaint would be how TV time is not enough for the roster to truly be in the spotlight and show what they can do. But that's a complaint I have with the two biggest wrestling companies today. Skip forward, he's talking about Bayley, that Bayley doesn't get a lot of television time. And they're basically saying, and this goes back to the old wrestling versus entertainment kind of thing that we talked about earlier, where he wants these guys to have 20-minute matches. I think he literally says that in here. Quote, "You'll see how women are given matches that last 2 to 9 minutes, with the exception of being title defenses. Those go for 11 minutes or whatever." So he's breaking out the stopwatch. It doesn't matter how long the matches are. Goldberg got over, his matches were 3 minutes. Ultimate Warrior used to get over in very quick matches. The amount of time doesn't matter. What you do with that time does indeed matter. When you talk about somebody like Bayley, the booking has been pathetic. And it has been, she hasn't been given a lot of time. But that includes time to cut promos and work her angles. The reason why it worked in 2020 is Bayley was given enough time. She was given, the ding dong hello show or whatever that Vince gave her. And she would be able to use that time to push her angle, to work her, what she was doing, to, get over her personality. So when she did work, it mattered more. Now everybody's just basically put the belt on Bayley and then throw her in the ring after you've done a triple threat or whatever to decide who the number one contender is. That's not going to get anybody over, and it's not going to get them over the way that you want them to be over. And what I mean by that is you want people to be invested in the character and what they're doing, even when they're not in the ring. Because sometimes guys like a Stone Cold Steve Austin or an Undertaker or a Rock or whatever, they get huge responses without even wrestling. They could just make an appearance, work the gimmick, and go home and everybody's happy. That's because you're over as a personality. Nobody's expecting you to do a routine. Nobody's expecting you to do anything. You just have to appear, and people will be excited. Roman Reigns is super over right now without even appearing on the show, because people want to see him interact with the other people on the show. They don't care that he's not going to wrestle them for months and months. They just want him to come out and confront them. There's electricity building there. And they're not doing that with the women's division. So you do have a point that the women's division is extremely poorly booked. But I would just say that that's the booking of the company in general. Sometimes it is the matches for the men are too long and they cut into the women's time. Sometimes that's the case. But the response from this writer is that they need longer matches. To which case I will say, longer matches ain't going to solve your problem. What solves your problem is more personalities, more angles, getting to know these characters and how they're changing. It's easy for our Bayley because she's been there so long. It's easy for Nia Jax because she's been there so long. It's not so easy for Blair Davenport, for Lyra Valkyria, and for other women because they're so new. We don't know who they are. What do they do? I guarantee you could probably put a gun to somebody's head and ask them what Blair Davenport's finisher is. They have no idea. You ask them what her character is, they have no idea. Because she's been on this roster all this time and they don't know. They haven't been shown anything. Not only have they not been shown anything in the ring, they haven't been shown anything in terms of personality, in terms of promo. It's just, so I will give you that the booking has been awful. This person then continues to say that Io Sky and Bayley didn't even get to WrestleMania main event, which they deserve, which is bullshit. Who cares? Then this person starts complaining about Dakota Kai crying on social media for an opportunity, and that's unfair. Later, this person said it's immoral for you to have people like Dakota Kai crying for opportunities and you not deliver on that. I say that WWE did not force her to cry. She did that to herself. And it's unfortunate that just because somebody is crying or somebody feels that they deserve more, that doesn't mean that they deserve more over other people. This is, of course, Triple H's fault because he's the one who has Dakota Kai on the roster in the first place. If it was Vince, she probably wouldn't even be there. She'd just be doing Twitch and probably doing jobs in AEW. But she's been featured for over a year in Damage Control. And she's been a part of an angle. She's been part of the tag team champions, part of the women's world champion. She's been there. She's been there to talk. She hasn't impressed. She hasn't really stood out. Just because people like her on Twitch doesn't mean that people are clamoring to see her in the ring. Let's continue. This person then starts going at NXT. This is going to undermine the entirety of the argument. This person says, quote, and don't get me started on the way Shawn Michaels is booking NXT. WWE was in your face saying they saved women's wrestling in the US and even did a whole pay-per-view to tell you, yeah, we'll book women better. But now people have realized the company is not willing to give women wrestlers a chance to shine as wrestlers. Incorrect. And you taking a shot at NXT just disproves your entire point. This person continues by saying, we can talk about mainstream appeal all you want, but do we need horny teenagers objectifying wrestlers again for a company to care about a whole division? How is it that with the depth of WWE's division, we're living in a reality where Tony Khan is doing a better job in booking them after years of not caring about it? See, here is your problem. You think that women can either be hot or talented and that they cannot be both, when in reality, they can be both. They can be both. This feminist false dichotomy that makes you choose between a beautiful girl and a talented girl, when the girl can't be both. She's both. NXT is full of women who are both. And the idea that you're going to go after NXT is pretty silly because nobody gives the girls more time than Shawn Michaels. And I'm talking in terms of time to grow the characters, time to work in the ring, booking them as equals to the men. Sometimes there's more women's matches on the show than the men. And you go after NXT, that means you don't really care about what you're saying. You're not really paying attention to what you're saying. You're so upset that it's hot women getting time. And not even all the chicks in NXT are hot, by the way. Some of them are kind of mid. But they're probably done up and they're in good shape or whatever. But that's a really interesting position for you to put us in. Because it undermines your entire point. Your entire point is the women aren't given storylines. They aren't given matches. But they are given storylines and matches on NXT, and then you discount NXT. It's like, no, we're not going to let you get away with that. We're going to hold your feet to the fire. We're going to say, who is booking the women's division better than Shawn Michaels? Because Tony Khan is still only doing one women's match per show. He's now got, I guess, multiple women's segments. But that's only because he spent so much money on Mercedes. While you have Shawn Michaels and NXT investing time in unknown women. Also investing time in women from other companies. And they're investing time in women who are free agents. They just signed a couple of female free agents that are, really lighting the internet on fire. NXT is doing exactly what you claim that you wanted from the women's division, and yet you still complain. And it's because you have a weird relationship to heterosexuality. Because heavens to Betsy, some man finds another woman hot. That's a problem. Oh, you can't have teenagers objectifying. What are you talking about, man? A man cannot find another woman attractive? What is the... You people have your weird sexual hang-ups. Stop projecting that onto everybody else. Because you can't handle it. Other people are doing just fine. Let's continue. Now they're going to talk about the perception of women's wrestling. It says the booking affects the perception fans have of women wrestling as a whole. Therefore, it adds to this complicity because fans are not accustomed to seeing WWE treat women's wrestling seriously. And they just have been doing it now because they have realized female wrestlers are an all-time high, and you can't ignore that. The thing is, fans have ignored that because they're conditioned to think about it like that. It's not that they think women's wrestling is less important than men's wrestling, but that the way they learned since the first time they started watching wrestling. It took a long time for some fans to admit the level of quality certain wrestlers got to at one point, and that didn't come without the obvious and apparent post filled with thirst about any of the women mentioned above. So they mentioned a list of women, some of whom some people find attractive, like Io Sky, Bayley, and Asuka. Asuka is not exactly the model when she's over 40, but some people do stand Asuka. I mean, it is what it is. But who cares? Why does it matter? Is Asuka less talented because she's attractive? Is Io less talented because she's attractive? If you think she's attractive, why do you care that other people like her for a different reason? She might have a great singing voice and people like her for that reason. Is that a problem? No, as long as people are cheering when she comes out or booing when she does something dastardly, why do you care? Why are you invested in why someone else cares about that person? Like they used to say, the guy's not over, the chant is over. The guy's not over, the song is over. And what that would mean is the guy wouldn't get a reaction outside of his song playing or people chanting a certain thing at him. And that, they don't sell merchandise. Nobody wants to see what he does on television. These are legitimate points. But at the same time, something like Rusev Day, if it's over, it's over. You trying to come to grips when trying to, smoke that copium and say, oh, it's not really over. It's just like somebody like me. I don't really like Orange Cassidy. Right? I don't like Orange Cassidy. But it would be a lie to say Orange Cassidy wasn't over for a time there. The AEW fans was into the gimmick. I wasn't into the gimmick, but the AEW fans was into the gimmick. I mean, it is what it is. He was selling merchandise. People was cosplaying him. So it made sense for AEW to push him, and they did. But then they pushed him too far, and now it doesn't work anymore. Sometimes that kind of stuff happens. So he continues. Wrestling fans have learned to treat women's wrestling as a bathroom break. Let's pause right here. It hasn't been that for a long time. That was during parts of the Divas era. So we're talking about something that was over 10 years ago. Enough's enough when it comes to that. All right? Just enough. Some people will just not like women's wrestling no matter what you do with it. And that's fine. I personally don't mind it. As long as it's good, I'm okay with it. As long as the girl has personality, I'm fine with women's wrestling. Some people, no matter what you do, they're not going to like it. Just like you're not going to get them to eat a hamburger, regardless of what you put on it. They might not eat fish, no matter what you do with it. Some people have different tastes, and that's fine. But lying and saying that they have, been treating the women like a bathroom break when they give the women Royal Rumbles and Money in the Bank matches and Queen of the Rings and all this kind of stuff is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. They still sell merchandise with the women on it. They still put them on the cover of posters and video games and all this kind of stuff. And you're telling me that they're treating it like a bathroom break? Where did you write this article in 2012 or something? This doesn't look like it was something that was written in 2024. Let's go. Let's continue. He says, we see women's matches being stuck in the middle of the card as some attraction rather than plain wrestling. I'm sorry, but attraction means that you're a draw. I don't know what it means to be plain wrestling. What does that mean? What does it mean to be plain wrestling? And why do you want to be plain wrestling? What does that mean? Nobody in the WWE should be plain wrestling. That sounds boring. That sounds like people are going to turn the channel. That sounds like people are not going to buy the merchandise. That sounds like people are not going to respond when you come out of the shoot. That does not sound like entertainment. That does not sound big budget. It does not sound Hollywood. It doesn't sound like what a WWE fan wants out of wrestling. Keep that mentality in Japan or in the Indies where you guys come from. This is the WWE you're talking about here. We need personalities. So this weirdo, once again, with their hang-ups about heterosexuality, says, quote, "Fans are busy talking about the attributes of any of these women in the most uncomfortable and creepy perspective possible, resulting in a blatant objectification of all wrestlers in the division pushed by the company and criticized by any woman who put her life at risk for a chance to be treated as a star. Who cares? All the women take the same chances. All of them went into the Royal Rumble or the ladder match. They all jump off the top rope. They all take the same chances. Some of them are better looking than others. Some of them are beautiful. They have nice butts. They have a nice rack. Whatever it is. Who cares? That other people are allowed to appreciate that. You are the one with the problem. You have a deep issue with heterosexuality, which, almost all feminists do for whatever odd reason, even though it's not really odd as much as they, hate the family and all this kind of stuff, right? So I'm really just going to skip a lot of this stuff, because they started talking about Becky Lynch and Bull Nakano and a bunch of stuff that I really don't care about. The next paragraph after that features a tirade about the Janelle Grant lawsuit, which I also don't care to get into at this time. So we're going to talk to this person about Triple H being a misogynist. So this person says, quote, "Triple H knows he's been a misogynist, and he knows wrestling culture will allow that to happen because there are current employees in the company that have not paid for what they did. The women's revolution is dead, and it's because it just lived as some boost to women's wrestling and weekly programming rather than a door to explore what more you could do with them. After all, the culture never changed. Therefore, fans' perception of women's wrestling didn't change either. That's why we're having a storm of viral posts of female wrestlers and slowed down videos that have a lot of creeps expressing their fantasies like it's okay to do because for WWE it is." Considering, what is this person talking about? He's talking about the fans' enjoyment of female bodies, which is a personal thing. Some people like the female body more than others. So what? If somebody decides that they're going to slow motion a man's body, they do that too. I see plenty of, gay dudes or lesbian women or whatever. People are, I guess you could say objectifying is going in every direction. The idea that this is somehow a thing the company is supporting, where it's not the company putting out slowed down videos of Rhea Ripley's booty. It's not. It's the fans doing it themselves. And the fans have a right to create their own content to a degree. But then you have some women who play into it. Rhea Ripley plays into it, Lola Vice, Jada Parker a little bit, Nikita Lyons a little bit. Then you have other ones that, Mia Yim said that she didn't like that, so she dressed in a way where people couldn't do that. Bayley does the same thing to a degree. People have to handle it on an individual level. But it's not the company telling people to do slow down videos. It's people doing it themselves. But there was something else I did not mention. The Saudi shows. How WWE essentially forced women's wrestling on the Saudis. Because remember, there was no women's match on the Saudi show, the first one. There was people who pitched a bitch because there was no women's wrestling on the Saudi show, because it was canceled because the Saudis did not want them. And then afterwards, they compromised. They let the women wrestle, but they had to dress appropriately. It had to fit the culture, which means baggy clothes, t-shirts, the like. And then we started getting cat suits. So cat suits, funny wear. I think Becky Lynch wore a tuxedo in the ring at one point. So then Americans start to complain about that because, the good liberals, they're 100% you should respect other people's culture. Until you start respecting other people's culture, then how can you just force people to do that? It's like, well, you can't have it both ways. You want to do business with these people, you have to respect their culture. They want the women to be dressed modestly. But you also don't want the fans objectifying the women. But if they're dressed modestly, you can't objectify them. So what do you want? Do you want to turn every Raw and SmackDown into a Saudi show? Or do you say, look, the women are just going to have to do what they do, and they are not in control of the fans' reaction, which is how it is now. The women are not in control of a man finding her attractive. She doesn't know that man, if he even is a man. Because we have to stop acting like a lot of the stan accounts are not teenage girls. And some of them are even homosexual men who still find the women attractive. It is what it is. You can't change that. There's nothing you can do about that. And Triple H is not a misogynist because other people are doing things that you find creepy. That's very strange. It's really strange to see people so bent out of shape about sexuality, and they're so uncomfortable with themselves and so uncomfortable with other people's sexuality. There's definitely freak stuff out there that, we would rather not go through. But it exists. It's Rule 34. It's the internet. Once I started seeing people drawing Marge Simpson porn, I gave up on trying to tell people what they can and can't do. As long as it's not an underage kid, it is what it is. You're into Naruto porn or whatever. You can't stop that. The creators of cartoon series have asked people, please, I remember the creators of Super Mario. It says, please don't do porn of Mario and Luigi having sex, and people do it anyway. From X-Men to Dragon Ball to all kinds of stuff. You cannot stop people who are gooners from gooning. You just can't do anything about it. And it doesn't matter whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, or otherwise. You can't stop it. That's the one thing you can't do anything about on the internet. Is gooners are going to goon. And if you upset about that, you're just going to be a mad ass. You can't stop it. Get over it. You have to, at that point, since you cannot change that person, the only thing you can do is change yourself. So that means you're just going to have to get over how uncomfortable you are with somebody else's sexuality and how they choose to express it. You're just going to have to get over it. There's just no two ways about it. So I get to the end of the article and I see a picture of the writer. And I still can't tell whether it's a male or a female. So that just goes to show not much has changed from Voices of Wrestling. So let me know what you guys thought of this article. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.